everybody. Welcome to Adopted Gals Podcast.
I'm Howard Zabel.
I'm Famata Warfield. So today's topic is separation from birth family. And we're going to be talking about how it affects adoptees from being separated from family, moving from Sierra Leone and coming to the States, and how that can be very traumatic. And it's going to be a little heavy topic today. So I'm going to let Howard lead.
Yes, so today is such an amazing topic because this is actually the question I get so often from families, friends, and just people when I tell them about my adopted story. And they're always curious to know, like, what was it like being separated from your birth family? What did that experience? Because most people can't imagine what that would be like to go through as a young child. And so that's why I'm super excited to talk about this. I know that this is such a deep topic for me. It's something that I have, when I'm doing a lot of child healing type of, what do you call it? Like child healing.
Healing your inner child.
Healing your inner child type of exercises. I always go back to this time because it's such a painful experience for me, and something that even just right now I can feel like the feelings are coming up a little bit. I'm getting a little emotional, and it's just it was a very, very challenging time for me.
So I'm gonna start back to when my family dropped me off at the orphanage. At first, when they were telling me about it, you're gonna go to the center, you're gonna get adopted, you're gonna go to America, and in Sierra Leone, in any impoverished country, America is seen as like heaven. That's where opportunities happen. You can live your life. You can do whatever you want, which is partly true about America. And I mean, there's really good. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I remember my dad dropped me off, and I was excited. I was in this new place, new center, and I was just seeing all the new kids, making friends. So it was fun and exciting at first, and then the days and months started to go on. And I started to really miss my birth family. I want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home.
Wait, so when they dropped you off, or did they drop you off? Did they say you're being dropped off for good, or did they just say, "Oh, you're just having fun with kids"? How did that?
We're dropping you off because we told you about you might get an opportunity to go to America.
So you knew that this was final.
I knew, but in my child brain, I probably didn't take it seriously or really understood what they were talking about. So I was like, all right, a cool, fun place to be, whatever. So after all those months and weeks and months started to go by, I was like, I'm homesick. I want to go home. And my birth mother, she used to come. She came to visit me once. I can only remember her coming to visit me once. And that's partly because she couldn't really afford to get transportation to come and see me as often as she would have liked. And she came one time, and I was so happy to see her. I just was so overjoyed, and she bring me little treats and stuff. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember her, just seeing her, being more focused on her. And I was hugging her, begging her to take me with her, take me back home. And I think she was trying to do the tough parent love thing. She was like, if you don't stop crying, I'm never going to come visit you again. Ooh, it hurt my heart so much. But back then I was like, I won't cry anymore. I won't cry anymore. So that was super heartbreaking. And my father came to visit once, and I remember he brought me fish. I love fish. And I feel like a lot of
fish is like a staple
it's definitely a staple. And I was so excited about that. And I didn't cry because I didn't want him to be how my mom was. So they came to visit as much as they could, not as much as I'd hope. Eventually, I just acclimated to the climate, the orphanage, and how life was. What about you?
Do you feel like maybe like the people who are the directors of the orphanage itself, do you think they maybe advised the parents to your mom to not come as often or something like that? Or did she ever say anything about that? Or
no, she never did. But honestly, I can see them doing that to create that and start to create a separation where you're losing your child. You might not ever see your child like that. And so you have to start that whole journey of basically releasing them and knowing that they're going to a better place. I'm making air quotes, a better place, because I feel like the best place that a child can be at is with their parents, their birth parents. I think they probably did tell him to not really visit as much. Yeah.
Probably like they wanted the adopted parent or the birth parents to be weaned off from.
Yeah.
You can't have like, such close connection and then rip them apart. You have to, you said, create that separation over time.
Right, and they keep coming back, and then the wounds are reopened, and it's like you gotta heal again, and then it just keeps happening back and forth. But what about you? What was it like when you got dropped off?
Ooh. So actually, before I even got dropped off, so I was living, just for background story, I was living with my mom. So my mom and my dad, my birth parents, they never got married. They never lived in the same place. During the time, again, like I said in our intro video, there was the war. So it was actually very dangerous for men to be in the downtown in Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone. So a lot of men actually fled Sierra Leone or Freetown and went to neighboring countries or cities, because if they were captured or caught, they would be forced to fight in the war. So my father, he ended up fleeing. He went north. And so it was just me and my mom. And I remember me and my mom would be running from destination to destination, never really had a home. All of our homes would get burned down by fires from the war, from rebels coming in and just firing our community and our tribe. So we were always on the run. So my mom was really in a desperate place and position to find a place that was safe for me, that could take care of me. I was starving. I remember there was points in my tribe where me and our neighboring kids, we had no food. So we would have to walk around and in Sierra Leone, a lot of the houses were either made out of tin or mud. So I remember us going and picking mud from the houses and eating it. Oh my gosh, we were so malnourished and we had no food. It was just, that was like food for the day. Or we would have to go to the ocean as little 4 or 5-year-olds and go fishing and bring it back home to our family. So you got to understand as a viewer that my mom was desperate. She didn't know what to do. So she heard about this orphanage. And so I remember one day, this was before I even got dropped off, I remember she told me and I think a couple other kids who ended up going to the orphanage with me at the same time, she told us that we were going to church. So, and I remember I was like, I think we actually did end up going to church before we went to So I remember my mom, she told me and the neighboring kids, a couple of us, I remember it was me, Joseph, and Kadijatu, and maybe one other person.
Joseph? They dropped you off with Joseph?
You remember Joseph?
Yeah. Girl, we'll talk about Joseph later.
Joseph was my best friend.
I talked about Joseph before, but anyways, go ahead.
We gotta talk.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Joseph was my best friend. I used to go fishing with. He actually taught me how to fish.
Really?
By hand. Hopefully, we're talking about the same.
Joseph, if the one who got adopted to Canada, right?
I don't know if he ended up getting adopted. I'm not sure.
He got adopted to Canada.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Canada.
I gotta check in with my mom, but so. My birth mom told us that we were going to church. We ended up going to church. And then me and her, we ended up going to I think also the kids came as well. I don't remember exactly, but we ended up going to the orphanage just to go and visit, right? And I remember this very distinctively because there was a lot of trauma involved. Yeah. Because I don't know if you remember the actual landscape of the environment, or the orphanage, but there was a hill. You remember the hill, and then there was a gate.
Yeah, gate hill.
Yeah, there was the hill, and then there was the gate, and then there was the actual orphanage itself. And I remember, for some reason, there was neighborhood dogs that started chasing us, and I was so scared. I ended up falling down the hill, going towards the orphanage. And I remember half of my head gotten busted and it was split and it was bloody. Oh my God. So that was a very traumatic experience for me. And I was so scared of those dogs. They were big and they were just barking. And I remember having to go to the gate of the orphanage, and the security rushed me in and they got Band-Aid and patched up the back of my head. And so it was a very scary experience. I remember going to the visitor center and just seeing my mom. She went into the office with the orphanage directors, and they were just talking and whatnot. And so then we ended up going back home, and I remember asking her a few questions, but she wasn't really answering much, right? Then we did end up coming back later, and she was like, oh, we're just gonna go back to the same place. And so we went to the orphanage, and she went into the office. I actually went into the office with her, and I remember just sitting there being kind of bored. I was like, I didn't understand what they were talking about, to be honest with you. I don't know if they were speaking English or Creole, but I know I was just very, very bored, and I heard kids yelling, and the orphanage had multiple floors, and I remember kids yelling downstairs, and I told my mom, I was like, hey, can I go play with the kids? And she was like, absolutely. So then I went down to play with the kids, and I was going down, I started playing with the kids, and little did I know that was basically the last moment I was going to be talking to my mom. And so I'm playing with the kids, and we're having fun. There's all these bunk beds, we're playing hide and seek, and I'm like, oh, I'm done, I want to go visit my mom again. So I'm going back upstairs, and as I'm going upstairs, I see my mom has her stuff, her bag packed up, and she's heading towards the door, and she's leaving. And I'm like, what's going on? I know we're leaving, let's go. And she was like, oh no, you're gonna stay here. So the whole time, actually, I think the plan was for her to just leave instead of having to say bye. And I just remember there was the hallway, and I was ushering towards her and running towards her, and the staff members were trying to rip me from her. And she was like, oh no, I'll be back. She's like, I'll be back. It's fine. I'll be back. And I was like, so, but why do I have to be here by myself? Why are you leaving me here? And I was just crying. I remember just bawling. I was just crying so much. And I was like holding onto her arm, and she was trying to go away without, she was, obviously she was going through a lot of pain, but she was trying to be strong for both of us. So that was just a very traumatic moment. And when I was young, I used to beat myself up about it, because I was like, well, maybe if I hadn't gone downstairs, she wouldn't have left. You know what I mean? Maybe if I hadn't gone to play with the kids, she wouldn't have left. So I always told myself that story. But yeah, Fatmata was just such a traumatic experience for me, and so scary. And my mom, she did end up visiting me. She had visited me quite a bit, actually, and it was so sweet because she would always bring treats, and I really cherished those moments with her, because we'd sit down and talk, and I still always asked her, like, why am I here? And it took me a while to find out the reason, which was because the hope and the goal was for me to get adopted.
Oh, girl, we've known each other for so long, and I feel like this podcast is also helping us know each other even better, because you never told me about that. And in your story, when you were talking about what you were saying, it triggered my memories as well. And when you talked about your father having to go into neighboring countries to have to fight, and during the war as well, my family did basically what your family did, running away and being constantly on the road. And my mom actually told me a story that we were running away from rebels, and I was like a baby, and she had me tied to her back, and she was running, and she dropped me. She dropped me.
Is that why you're a little slow?
Oh, maybe that's why my head is so big. Wow, look at us making jokes to keep from crying. No, but and I'm just like, wow, you really love me that much to go back and get me.
The rebels are not a...
That's a different story for a different day. So for her to do that, thank you so much for that. But I also remember my father always being away a lot. And I remember we had to go to a different area. Tombo is where I grew up most of the time. And then another part where my family lived was Shenge. And so it was just me, my siblings, and my mother. And like you said, the men were away, and my dad was always away. So it makes sense now. And I never knew why he was always away. So it makes sense now that you brought that up, that they were trying to not be forced to join the war. But yeah, my family did basically make the same sacrifices that Hawa's family made. And it's just to give us a better life. And because both of us have lost siblings. And for me, I don't know the full story, whether some of my siblings died during the war or because of sickness. But my mother had between 9 to 12 children, and she lost them to disease, a lot of them to disease. And so it's just like 3 of us that are left now. And I was very sick. I had malaria. I had all these different things going on. And my mom thought, she's next. So she felt like, oh, well, I got to do something. Both of my parents got to do something. We got to give her up. We got to try to give her a better life. So that's when they decided to make that sacrifice and trying to give me a better life. And you said your family has lost kids as well.
My birth mom had about 4 kids in total, and so all of them passed away. So I'm literally the only one surviving. So when we talk about adoption as a whole, a lot of times we just focus on the sacrifice of the adopters, but there's sacrifice in all angles, in all areas. For the adopters, yes, definitely. For the adoptees, but especially for the birth family, especially
the sacrifices they made as well is not talked about enough.
Especially if they're adopting kids that they've grown with, they've nurtured a little bit, they've had time to create a bond with them. That's such a huge sacrifice that a lot of times is not really talked about. And I know that was such a painful experience for my family, my mom, and even to this day, I'm in communication with my birth mom, and she talks about, you really made a big sacrifice to not have you here because you're the only one I have left. You're the only one. She literally tells me, she's like, you're the only one I have left. And it makes me so sad to hear that.
Oh my gosh, I hope I don't freaking cry. My mom, for a while, when I used to speak to my mom, and she would just cry every single time she see me. She just burst out into tears, and I'm like, I'm crying with her too. And you're right, a lot of the times we don't think about not the adoptive parents, but the biological parents had made that sacrifice in giving the kids away. And like I said, this podcast is just to show all the other sides. Wow.
So thank you guys for reliving this or living this experience with us. We got this opportunity to relive it because as I'm telling the story, I literally could imagine the young version of myself being a little girl, being so confused, so hurt, and just like, this is a topic we'll talk about later, but just the amount of abuse that I went through in the orphanage, just like thinking, how could my birth mom ever think this is the right place for me to be in? After all this abuse, she doesn't even know what I'm going through. She doesn't even ask me what I'm going through. And she has no clue, but she thinks this is the best option for me. And obviously, as an adult, as I'm sitting here on this couch and I'm comfortable in America, I can say, I think it was the best decision, right? But there was so much pain and sacrifice from my mom's side, from my side, and my adoptive family side.
And to add on to that a little bit, us adoptees and what we lose when it comes to adoption, and us coming from Sierra Leone to here to America, we lose everything. And that is something that is not talked about as much. We lose our culture, music, the food, our families, the language, all of that is ripped away from you, and then you're put into this new culture, right? And it's like, so this is your new family, this is your new environment. You have to learn how to fit into it, and it's next to impossible to fit into that because it's not your environment. Nobody looks like you. For my case, you had more of a diverse culture when you moved to California.
I did.
For me, nobody looked like me. Nobody sounded like me. The language was different, and I had to figure out how to fit in while grieving all the things that I've lost. My family, my friends, all of that stuff. So that stuff, that is a sacrifice.
And I can attest to her culture because I did visit her the first couple of years of me being in America. And you were raised up in white suburban
the whitest suburban neighborhood you can think of in America. That's how I
But I always love visiting her place because her house, it was just so cute. Their little safe suburban neighborhood. It was very adorable.
It was and that's the other things that I also want to add. That was one of the good things that came out of being adopted, in being provided a safe space like that, in terms of security and being safe and danger and stuff like that.
Because that's the opposite of Sierra Leone.
Oh, it's opposite. It's so opposite. So much danger. But yeah, it's just, you do. And then sometimes you lose your sense of self. And you're trying to figure out, like, how do I fit into this culture? How do I figure out how to be, how to talk, how to act, how to look? It's a lot. And I guess let's move on to a little lighter topic. If you have anything else to add before we move on to a lighter topic.
The sacrifice, talking about sacrifice?
Yeah. If you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think that's pretty much all I have to say as far as being left at the orphanage. There's more things we can talk about, like experience in the orphanage in the future. But as far as being left, I think that was the biggest thing, was that moment, that pivotal moment where I felt my hand detached from my birth moms, and it was just like such a surreal feeling, biological parents. But now we want to transition to talk more about after the actual adoption happens, what does sacrifice look like for the adoptees and also people, adopters as well, because there's a lot of sacrifice on both sides.
I'm so sorry, girl. I just love listening to you talk, that's all, because I love you. That's why I'm like, but I'm like, it should be like this. I'm so sorry.
So our next topic will be around the sacrifices that comes in place when a child does get adopted, from the adoptee standpoint and also from the adopter standpoint, because there's a lot of sacrifices.
There is. There's a lot of people. Everybody's making sacrifices for sure. So this topic was deep, and later on as we go, we're gonna get more specific and pinpoint things. So thank you for watching this part with us.
Thank you so much.
It was hard talking about it, but we got through it.
I know. I saw a little bit of tears coming through your eyes, and I was like,
hold on.
Got you, girl.
But thank you guys so much for watching and being on this journey with us. See you next time on the next episode. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye.